Did you log in to Zoom as well? Okay, that's great. So, you put the presentation on Zoom. So we'll just wait for a couple of minutes.
I'm not tracking the.
Yeah, check our looking at.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't have chairs, you have the tables. You can sit. And there's one here if you want to. Yeah, there's one more there.
Yeah, I think Scott is getting a few chairs from that room as well, so.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay.
I think for now we're sorry. Yeah. Okay, I think we can't exclude more chairs. That's well, so the classroom. That's fine. Probably for the moment.
Can this be moved? I'm a little worried I might just push this.
Sure. Where would you like it to move?
Just push it back a little bit so that it's not there. Oh, there you go. Yeah, maybe a little better. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
any
good.
more?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
That's it. Well, then should we get started? Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, go ahead, get started.
Okay, so we'll get started again. So thanks for coming in. I hope to see such a good crowd here. And first of all, thanks a lot for FedEx Institute of Technology for sponsoring this Technology Serving Humanity Speaker Series. We had great speakers last semester, and we have a lineup of even greater speakers this semester. So the first in-person speaker for the semester, we have Dr. Sandeep Purao from Bentley University. I'm pretty sure all of you have read his profile. One overarching theme of his research for years together, I think you listened. That's it.
No.
Keep going, sir.
Okay, so one overarching theme of his research overall has been how to use technology to make social impact. Right, that's what he's been researching on, and he's very well known in the design science area, which is what I also pursue in my own research. They have worked on several interesting projects with faculty here and across the field. So today he's going to talk about what exactly does it take to do impactful research, and using technology, how can we actually make it? So with that, Sandeep, it's all yours.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, thank you, Srikar. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Jaspir, and thank you to the FedEx Institute of Technology as well. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see this crowd. I was asking Srikar, I don't know where I am. Am I in Memphis or am I in Hyderabad? The talk that I'm going to present today is an academic talk, it's a scholarly talk. It has a message that is at least partially aimed at scholars and researchers. But as many of you are grad students, some of you might end up moving from your master's into the PhD program. And I'm sure all of you are interested in some form of knowledge production, right? Knowledge production and dissemination. So I hope that you're going to get some of these pieces as we talk. From this side, I can see the screen, but sometimes it's been going off and on. So if that happens, somebody please alert me. Yeah. Okay. So the talk is titled Pursuing Impactful Research, 6 Not So Easy Challenges. I'll start by introducing the university that I come from, a little bit about myself, and then we'll launch into the talk itself. Before I go into that, the word impactful up there should mean something to you. And I want you to just think about that.
Okay,
There you go. Okay. I want you to just think about that word impact. What does impact mean? You don't have to answer. It's not a class. But think about what that word means, impact. Okay, and that's what we'll attempt to talk about. Okay. So Bentley University, not the car, the university, is in Greater Boston and surrounded by some other not so well-known universities all around us. Those are only a few names. There is a ton of universities all over Greater Boston. One of the things that happens when a city or a region has so many universities, every university gets specialized. And so Bentley is also specialized. We are primarily a business university. And within that, we are known for finance and accounting. So that's been the calling card. Some numbers that we use to talk about the university with parents, local community, etc. Number 1, undergraduate career services and 99% placement rate. So that's been the important piece for us. Okay. So I joined Bentley about 7 years ago. I've lived in a few different universities. And the community of research that I work in is called MIS. All of you are familiar with that. Within that, design science, and that's me in that community. The words design science mean that you think about designing something as a scientific activity. Okay? You design something, and that design itself is a scientific activity. Now, that is not as an easy leap for a lot of researchers and scholars. We don't think about designing as a scientific activity. And so that's been something that my community, the community that I'm a part of, has been pursuing. One of the papers that I wrote about 20 plus years ago is now something that is never published, but continues to be cited. And the title of that paper is Truth or Dare? Truth or Dare? So as scientists, we pursue truth, but as design scientists, we dare to change the world. So that was the idea for that paper. My own research journey, I started with decision-making, multiple criteria decision-making. I went to design science, and now I'm more or less focused on this idea of designing technology for society. And that's why I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more about this idea of pursuing impactful research. The talk itself has a number of slides. First, talk a little bit about this idea of what is impact. That's a question I posed for you earlier, and why you should care, why we should care, and then talk about these not so easy 6 challenges. When I've done this talk in the past, it tends to be a very long talk. So today I'm going to actually skip one of those, which is number 5. Okay. And essentially we'll go ahead and take a look at some of the others. Okay. In case you're thinking, why is it number 7? Well, it's one was taken by that first one, okay? So what is impact? I posed that question to you before. So let's look at what is impact. Here's my definition of impact. It's a positive change. It's a benefit to the economy. How research contributes to the achievement of desired societal goals. Contribution beyond academia. Now, I have my colleagues here, researchers, scholars, your professors. They are looking at this and they say, impact? Isn't publication an impact? I published something. That's impact, right? And what I'm trying to argue here is publication is not enough for impact. In fact, that third piece, it says contribution beyond academia. And that's the piece that we haven't been pushing as much. So that's the argument that I'm trying to make. The moment we say that, we are then asked to think about the difference between publishing something and achieving impact. Like anything else, I think we have a lot of master's students here, so I'll put it to you this way. If you publish a blog entry versus if you publish something in the top magazine or a journal, you realize that there's a difference between those two, right? You can be your own blog entry, but then publishing it someplace, somebody is a gatekeeper who will make sure what you're writing is appropriate. You agree with that? Yeah. So it's the quality of writing. That's what we talk about when we talk about how good research is. It's quality. For a lot of researchers and scholars, we often tend to equate quality with impact. I got a publication in an A-level journal. What's that impact? Not necessarily. Right? So the simple statement here is the following. When you talk about academic quality, that is a different dimension from broader impact. Academic quality of some piece of research that a scholar has done that is vetted by the community of peers. Sikar, how long does it take generally for an A-level publication to get published? 3 to 4 years. 3 to 4 years. Multiple cycles of revisions, etc. Reviewers look at it and they come back to you and they ask you to make changes, right? That's academic quality, right? They're trying to make sure that you have something worthwhile to say. But broader impact is different. It says you have to go beyond academia. So the simple argument is these are two different dimensions. Again, returning to our researchers and scholars in the group here, I think sometimes we look at something called Google Scholar and citations, and we say, well, isn't that impact? I'm trying to make the statement that no, that's not impact beyond academia. Those are your colleagues and others who are citing your work within the research domain. The impact is something that's a little different. Okay. Okay, I see a few people nodding. I'm glad to you see that. But if you disagree, this is the time to question. Okay. Now, there are a couple of things to note when we talk about impact. I'll go through the next couple of slides quickly. It can sometimes take a lot of time for impact to be realized. When I've talked to my colleagues who are philosophers, right? Yeah, in some places, it can take a long time for that impact to be realized. Okay. Sciences, maybe years. And I'm going to put MIS, business, engineering. These are all what I would call applied fields. So we end up working with problems that are seen in practice, and we attempt to solve some of those problems, right? So the intent here is that we would like that impact to be fast. That's one argument. The second argument is that when we think about impact, we often think about what I call linear models of impact. A linear model of impact says that I do research, then I bring those outcomes to practice so that I can have it. And many of us end up pursuing this model of impact. Okay. Now, everybody okay so far with what we are trying to say? Yeah? Okay. Now let's take a segue into the big idea. The big idea is, you're all part of University of Memphis, you're here at the university. Well, what's the university? Where did it start from? What's its role? So, a couple of slides here with sort of the big picture. It wasn't always the case that we went to a university to understand knowledge for the sake of knowledge. That's academia. That's that asterisk that you see up there, right? Seminaries, these are places where you went to become priests, etc. Those were the places. The idea of pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge was not necessarily the starting place. Right? Now, where does that lead us? Pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge. I don't care about impact. Right? Now, that was not necessarily the way that researchers thought about it, but that's the manner in which we see that timeline. Your speed of reading the slide is much faster than what I can talk. So you can see a lot of words up there. Okay, but you can see that when academia started, for example, land grant university, is U of M a land grant? I don't know. No, we don't. We don't. Okay. So a land grant university is where the federal government, for example, gives you land and says, okay, this is my contribution, go start a university. Now, since then, there have been sea grant universities, and now there are space grant universities. That means you have the right to pursue research and help the community in those spaces. The reason I'm telling you all this is that some of this is important for us to understand in terms of thinking about impact. So a statement that is often made about universities is the following. The original noble purpose of universities was to conduct research that would contribute to advancing societal understanding and well-being. And being a scholar automatically implied doing research that matters. And that means pursuing impactful research. Yeah. Now, let's juxtapose that with what I grew up in as a researcher, what our doctoral students are doing, what our faculty are doing. And when I say juxtapose, I'm not criticizing. I'm simply saying that very often, these are the paths that we pursue. As a faculty member, by the way, does everybody know there's something called tenure for faculty? Everybody know what that is?
Probably the master's students might not be aware.
The idea of a tenure is that when a faculty member gets hired, you go on probation for 6 years. Probation, is that word familiar? So your job is not permanent for the first 6 years, right? Depending upon how good your research is, other people outside the university will comment on it, and then the university will say, okay, we'll grant you tenure. So during those first 6 years, the researchers are really trying to write papers because it's the papers that indicate that they can do research, right? But the papers are telling us what? Quality, not it. Correct? You agree with that? Okay. And when that happens, by the way, up there is a tenure evaluation formula that I think I'll leave our researchers to read through and it makes sense of. Okay. But what ends up happening is that if you get into that mode of doing research, and the story used to be like this, you get into this box, right? And in that box, we got 6 sides. And every side has a puzzle. And you keep solving those puzzles. At the end of 6 years, you've solved all the puzzles, you'll be happy. 2 sides open up. I think we lost this. 2 sides open up. Oh, okay. On one side, you got blue sky and industry, and you can go talk to people. On the other side, there's a bigger box with more puzzles. What do the researchers do? The bigger box with more puzzles. Because we've been trained to do that, right? Again, I'm not knocking us. I mean, I'm part of this community. This is what we are trained to do. It is an important element of what we do, but there's a cost to this. There's a cost to this. Okay? So let's look at what the cost is of the cost of research. So these numbers next, what I'm going to show you are going to come from average numbers in business schools. What is the cost of producing an A-level article, journal article? Now, A-level journal article is the idea that there are quality indicators. There are some journal articles that are high quality, then mid, low, etc. Right? What you see there are general indicators. So, for example, the faculty salary, benefits, or overheads for the year about 300,000. How much of that time do they allocate to research versus teaching versus service? About 50%. Number of journal articles produced per year, 0.75. Cost per author, 200,000. Number of authors is 2. Cost per article is 400,000. Now the question is simple. If you're going to spend $400,000 of our society money, should we not worry about impact? That's the argument. Right? That's the argument we are trying to make. Now, this is something that I think business schools have dealt with. Many other schools have dealt with. The numbers here are indicating, they're telling you that this is an area that we need to pay attention to, because increasingly, the society is telling us that you don't know what you're doing. There is a significant erosion of public trust in our institutions in general. I've had the fortune or misfortune of spending time across multiple universities, and the sad part is that we are beginning to lose faith in a lot of our institutions, and we are losing the freedom. Okay, thank you. So these are a few quotes that we see from different sources. Okay. I think when we start looking at some of these, we have to ask the question: we are spending a lot of dollars on doing this research, and most of our scholars and researchers are pursuing quality, but only quality and not looking at impact. Will we be able to regain the trust of society? Okay, now why is that important? In some ways, researchers, scholars are like artists. Back when in the court, there was a king, and the king would support all of these things, right? Or maybe I should read the king or the queen, right? Today, the society supports all these things, right? If the society sees no value in this, will it support us? So this is a quote now that comes from UMich President, 2016. And I'll be quiet for a few seconds and let you read that underlined piece. The word that I have added is the word only. That is not in the original quote. Is it just
It's just flickering it. I put it in, I think it flips that.
okay? Okay. So the argument that we are trying to make is that as researchers and scholars, we cannot only rest on this idea that we are publishing research and we are simply getting different. Now, I am not making the argument that quality is unimportant. But what I'm saying is that we also need to think a little bit more about impact. So hopefully the last 10-15 minutes, I've tried to make an argument that impact matters and we should pursue impact. But now the question becomes, how do we pursue it? Now, those of us who are researchers and scholars in the room, the first thing that we are going to hear is that pursuing impact needs time. I know that. And again, we are required to, we are supposed to write great papers, high quality papers that lead us to presentations that can be seen, but as we wait for that, I'm getting this, I'm trying to get a read. Are you agreeing with the statement that I'm making? Are you agreeing with the argument that I'm trying to put? Yes? Not really. Okay. So you, are you students or scholars? Researchers? Students, okay. Would you like to elaborate?
Mostly I get this. Without the retail benefits policy. And then.
Big question.
They are looking at that without to be ahead of it. And the fact that society because the impact of what they are doing did not mean that the one impact. Then that they were probably having this time. They will not be able to use that. What the research is right now, only means the policy has not been probably to the victim.
It's a great point, and that's something that keeps coming up, and that was the timeline that we talked about. Sometimes it takes a long time for that impact to be realized, right? So the question is going to be, how do we continue to have that impact so that maybe for some of our research, we show immediate impact, for some of the other research, we wait for the long time to get that impact, right? So there are different ways that we can address that question. And that is exactly what we'll attempt to do, right? So all I have said in the first several slides is impact matters, and impact is not the same thing as quality. That's what I'm trying to. Now the next question comes up: how do we make sure that we are pursuing that the outcomes that we want, right? So so let's go through a few simple things to get impact. And by the way, will it help if I stand here? Does it? Doesn't matter, right?
It might.
Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, so how does one attempt to pursue impactful research? So the first thing that we have to do is we have to, the first challenge is that we have to choose.
Maybe you can just continue, or you can just look at the slides there. And
Yeah. I know, but okay. So the first challenge is that we should choose important problems. It's a very simple statement, choose an important problem to work on. Having gone through my own career, I will confess that I did not always choose important problems to pursue. Okay. Now, what's an important problem and what's not an important problem? Well, there's a difference between a problem that is important and a problem that is interesting. I'm okay. So there have been arguments that say any problem that you study to sufficient depth can become interesting, right? But it might be interesting to you. I mean, the question that we are asking is, when we are saying an important problem, is it a problem that would matter? Is it a problem that would matter to some external stakeholders, right? There was a conversation that I had yesterday with two of our PhD students here, where we talked a little bit about looking for these problems. So very often, scholars and researchers, when we are taught to look for what others have done in the past, so that we can identify gaps that we can pursue as the next research step. Okay? So maybe people have looked at a particular way of thinking about health informatics. And we look at a lot of that, and there's this thing called literature review, right? And so we do that and we say, okay, that's what people haven't done yet. Now let me pursue it. So that mode of finding a problem is sometimes referred to as discipline generating, right? So you're looking at gap spotting. So you look at what other people have done in the past and you say, oh, that's the piece that hasn't been done. Let me go do research on that, right? So you can think about your research as discipline generated, or you can go talk to people out there, right? Go talk to folks out there. A great example is FedEx, right? So you can say, FedEx, they have problems of a certain nature, and now I want to see what I can do to address that particular problem. So you can think about that as practice generated problem. The question that often comes up is when researchers pursue this, there's within the research community, people will say, oh, that person is just doing consulting. That's not research, right? So the challenge for the researcher then is to figure out how to look at that practice generated problem and make sure that you cast it as a general, more abstract problem so that you can pursue. But the big distinction here is between discipline generated and practice generated. The quote down here comes from Brooks, who happens to be a computer science person. And it's a lovely quote that says, pitching our research to somebody else's driving problems and solving those problems on the owner's terms leads to much richer research. I'm very well aware that within the IS department here at University of Memphis, a number of your professors are already pursuing such research, particularly in the health arena, right? So when you start looking at that mode of research, you have to ask the question. It is not always, the problem is not always something that comes from gap spotting, but it is practice generated. So that's the one easy step to think about. When you consider problems, what we want to do is we want to avoid what are called type 3 errors. Anybody familiar with type 1, type 2? Yeah. So type 3 errors essentially saying, no, don't answer the wrong question, right? Make sure that you are pursuing something that is an important and a question where the solution will matter to folks. A lot of people have written about this. I'm going to give you a list of considerations that comes from a guy named Arun Rai, who happens to be another big researcher in the MIS discipline, also was the chief editor of one of our top journals. I want you to take a look at that picture up there, right? It shows this person who's looking for the keys. Oh, you lost your keys. Are you looking for your keys, right? And if you see what the person is saying, yeah, I lost my keys over there, but the light is better over here, so I'm searching for my keys over here. And sometimes if we don't know exactly what the particular problem is, we tend to go with a solution process that we are familiar with, as opposed to taking a look at the problem itself, right? And so that's called the street light. You can think about a number of different things that you can consider to make sure that you're getting the right problem. I'll say this for the lot of students that we have here. Has it ever happened to you if you have a particular project that you're working on in your class, and your professor tells you to come up with a problem or working with somebody outside, and you come up with a problem for your team project, and the professor says, no, it's too tiny, or it's too big, right? Well, what you want is that Goldilocks zone, right? It's well-scoped problem that is not too large, that is not too tiny, right? The researchers have to do the same things, right? So there are many different ways that one can think about in terms of picking the right problem. I'm going to finish this section by showing you one example that comes from our own research. Again, I'll pause here and let you read. So in this project, what we did is that we attacked that problem. There are a number of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Schools have some resources and programs to help them. But once they go through school, they don't always have the scaffolding that is needed to help them move from school to work. Can technology help in that way? Yeah. In and of itself is a very interesting problem. If you think about that, how can technology help? Right? Somebody who is autistic, somebody who has taken some time to go through school, and now we want to help this individual become a fully productive citizen in society. Technology. That was an interesting problem. So that's what we did, and one of the things that we ended up doing is developing multiple tools. Happy to talk about any of these things in person. Using SDGs for framing. So this is the last piece that says that for that first one, choosing important problems. Anything that you're looking at as a researcher, can you connect to some of these top level goals that you can consider? So that was the first challenge. Let's go to the second challenge. The second challenge essentially says, fine, you found a good problem. Is that enough? If you found a good problem, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have now reached nirvana, right? What you now need to do is make sure that you're building an effective solution, building a good, appropriate, effective solution. So how do you make sure that you can do that? A few things. Let's make sure that we know what a solution looks like, and make sure that when we are talking about a solution, it is something that is going to address that problem, but it's not going to introduce new forms of harm. Now, notice, if you remember way back when in the first couple of slides, I was introducing what I do as research. I use the term design science. Design science is the idea of designing as science, right? So designing solutions itself as a scientific activity, right? And so I know that, Pita, you talked about this, many of our faculty members here at Memphis do this. So when we think about designing a solution, we want to make sure that we are designing what's called an appropriate solution, right? Many things can happen, many things can go wrong when we design a solution. Many things can go wrong when we design a solution. There can be unanticipated outcomes, right? Thank you. Okay. They can be
But we can design a
outcomes.
solution.
Yeah.
But we can get back.
And sometimes when we address a problem, we end up sort of designing things, addressing the ancillary pieces, not the key problem, right? So in many ways, getting a good problem is not necessarily the end of it. What we really want is getting the right solution. Now, this piece is super important, particularly for us as researchers, because as researchers and scholars, we sometimes end up falling prey to the hammer problem or the duck test problem. The hammer problem. What's a hammer problem? You know this one. Everything looks like a nail when we have a hammer, right? Now, when a researcher looks at this, sometimes I like to use the word duck test. Now, duck test. What's a duck test? If it quacks like a duck, if it floats like a duck, it must be. But if it's a rubber duck or anything, we don't know. Okay? Now, sometimes I get these things from my students. It's two paragraphs of writing. It looks like good, dense writing. Must be a good answer. Yeah, I see some people smiling about that, right? So the idea of a duck test is something that we researchers often deal with in the context of something called method. The duck test problem. Okay. If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it must be a duck. So as researchers, we often fall prey to this piece of text. What is well-executed research? It reads like a research paper. You know, it certainly reads like a research paper. You can think about this as your term paper, for example. It reports research conduct like other research that I'm familiar with. Just yesterday, I think Pawan had a conversation with me about one of the papers that is going through your review process, right? It reads like a research paper, reports conduct like other research I know. But if it doesn't report conduct like the other research I know, it cannot do it. So we use this duck test in many different ways in terms of how we assess research. Nothing we can do about it, right? We just keep pausing. So when scholars do research, they think about many different kinds of research methods. These research methods have been proposed and tested in different ways, and researchers end up using these as what are called legitimation devices. A legitimation device means that it is something that allows you to say, what I have done is great because I have followed an accepted research. We can talk about, I'm going to use these words. You don't have to, this is something I'm saying to our students here. You don't have to remember these words, the positivist and interpreter, etc. These are different ways of thinking about research, right? But there is one class of research methods that I am going to recommend and suggest as a path to doing more impactful research. And that class of research methods is referred to as engaged scholarship or interventionist methods. Interventionist methods are methods that, by its very definition, want you to take the stance of going in and solving problems. A positivist research method says that you stand away from the phenomenon you're trying to study as dispassionately as you can and measure it, right? Interventionist methods say, go in, make a change, study the change, design a solution, figure out what worked, what didn't work. Make contributions in terms of theory, make contributions in terms of principles, figure out what that solution might look like. Again, going back to this idea of designing as a scientific activity. So there are some of these methods. Some of you might be familiar with this. Some of you might be seeing it for the first time. We don't have to look through all of these, but I will make special mention of one of these, which is called action design research. And one of the reasons why I want to make a special mention of this is because I was a co-author. And what is that? It says that when you are thinking about working in an organization to address and solve a problem and build a solution, here is the general method that you can follow. Problem formulation. Then the second step is building, intervention, and evaluation. Those are very interesting words. Building what? A solution, right? Intervene means get in there and start making changes. Intervene in what? The organization that you're working with, okay? Evaluation. Well, is it working? Is it not working, right? The most interesting part about the method is that it's saying, don't do these things separately. Do all of them at the same time. building intervention and evaluation and keep doing that in an iterative manner. That's what it is trying to say. And then all along, reflection and learning, and finally, generalize the outcomes and produce a research paper. Now, this is different. You remember earlier I talked about this idea of linear models of impact? Linear models of impact was you do the research and then you bring it to practice. This is different. This is saying work with the organization, solve their problem, and then try to come up with solutions that you can generate. A very different perspective on how one can think about the duck test. Two examples from our side. You don't have to look through all the details, but we had a couple of different projects. I'll talk about the one on the left, how to improve service delivery for the homeless in the Greater Boston area. This was a project that was funded by an entity called the National Science Foundation, and we did some work where we talked about not only what causes homelessness, long stays, and something called recidivism, so people keep coming back, but how do you change the triage problems, triage processes. So that's about designing effective solutions. The third challenge, which we have alluded to briefly, is working with partners. Okay? I'm keeping track of time, but we've been slowing down a little bit, so bear with me a little. How much time are we thinking about? We've been gone for about 30 minutes. Okay. Do you have a little bit more time? Yes. Okay, so the third challenge is working with partners, right? So when we think about working with partners, we're thinking about university researchers and external partners. This idea of working with organizations is something that we brought up briefly, right? But then why is it that we need to do something like this? Very often people talk about something called the research practice gap. So the university researchers do something, and then our external partners who are looking for something else. There's a gap. Okay. You guys are master's students. You will end up getting a job once you graduate. Yes. Yeah. Some of you have work experience. Yes. When was the last time you sat down and read a research paper because you just wanted to? Not because the professor assigned it. Thoughts? Maybe you don't have to answer, right? But the idea that I'm trying to get at is this gap, right? So if an industry person is looking for something, are they going to go ahead and read research papers? Often the answer is no. Right? And where does that come from? Right? Is that the reason for that long impact? One of the reasons, there are two ways to think about conceptualizing this gap. One of the reasons is that one of the reasons is that we are saying that this is a problem of knowledge transfer. That as scholars and researchers, we don't know how to transfer knowledge. We don't know how to write those research papers and then get that out into the hands of the practitioners. Sometimes we do training sessions, sometimes we find a way to convert that into some other forms of writing. We write white papers and so on, right? But that's one way of thinking about that problem. Research practice. The second one is failure. The second way of thinking about this gap is scarier. The second way of thinking about this is that what the university researchers produce, scholarly knowledge, and what the external partners need, like the industry folks, is practical knowledge. These are, in fact, two distinct types of knowledge. And if you agree with that, guess what the problem is? It doesn't matter how good your research papers are. Will you have that impact? No, because there are different types of it. You know where I'm going with this, right? So with impact, to truly produce impact, you must work with the partner. You can't simply say, I'm going to do this research, I'm going to write this paper, and somebody else is going to read my paper, and then they're going to use that. Now, granted, that has happened, that does happen. This goes back to the point you were making. Sometimes some of the interesting concepts that come up can get translated, do get translated into very interesting and useful and usable ways in industry. I'm making very broad and general statements here that say that those cases are few. And what we need is a much more active stance that allows us to pursue things in a different way. Okay, so if this is the case, then what we need to do is we need to partner. We need to find a way to partner, right? So partnering as a solution. What is a research partnership? A few bullets here that define what a research partnership is. This is what we need to do. Now, I know that many of you have been doing work with industry partners. Now I'm talking to our researchers and scholars. And when we do this, when we see the screen again, we will see a few arrows that tell us the way we can often think about partners. Okay? So if I'll come to you, so for example, university research is external partners, right? So if you're working with an industry partner, you can think about that individual or organization as a source of data, as a source of funding, and a source of problem. Is there anything missing? You didn't know I was going to ask you a question. Source of communication, yeah. If we are a partner, yeah. Source of knowledge, empower. So in a way, both of you are saying that what we need to do is we need to take a look at these partners as more than simply giving us problems. If we agree that these are different forms of knowledge, our partners can also give us solutions, right? So that action, design, research field that I talked about, that method before. So one of the basic arguments in that, the building, intervention, evaluation, those three things together. It's not that the researchers do this and they bring it in. They work with the industry partners to build those solutions. Okay? Now, by the way, I have to confess that, I'm trying to gauge, I know that we have different people in the room with different expectations and different foundational things. So what I'm saying is not something that you're agreeing with or disagreeing with. Because I see master students, PhD students, I see the VP of research, I see faculty, right? So we have different levels. So please speak up and ask, or when you disagree, tell me. So that will give us a chance to. Okay, so going beyond, it means essentially we don't want our partnerships to be simply one-sided. Okay, so what we want to do is want to make sure we want to work with our partners, and to go to your point, Pawan, when we are thinking about assessment, right? So sometimes we might end up saying, I have a solution. Can I come to you and test this, right? And the argument that is increasingly coming through is that we don't want to simply engage our partners at the end, but we would like to engage throughout, right? Early, during, and late. And at each phase, they're going to contribute differently. The demands on us as researchers are going to be different. But again, I'm preaching to the choir in this case because I know that you have been working on some of these projects yourself. Okay. I'm going to give you one example of that. Two examples. So these are two of our partners for research that we are doing. So one is the project that I talked to you about, helping the homeless for better service delivery in Greater Boston. We work with Pine Street Inn, which is the largest homeless shelter in the New England area. And another one that actually I'm working with Pawan on, this is for helping elderly manage their chronic condition. Okay. So we're working with two entities. One happens to be in Waltham, Massachusetts, where Bentley is located, and the other one is Penn State's Center for Lifelong Learning. So those are the two entities that we work with. The next thing that I have, the next challenge that I have is the challenge I said we are going to skip. So I'm going to show you one slide based on that. So the challenge, the next challenge is that whatever solution that you come up with, right? You're going to introduce that solution in the setting with the partners, right? What do you think these partners are doing? Are they just sitting there waiting for you to come and give you the solution and they'll be happy to introduce that solution? Probably not, right? They're doing their own things, right? Plus, within that organization, do you think there are a lot of other things that are dependencies across different things? Yes, right? So the fourth challenge we are talking about here is appreciating existing systems. If you're going to try to do impactful research, you realize that you are going to introduce a solution in a fairly complex web of entities, norms, values, ways of working, practices, procedures, processes, all of that, right? And so what you have to figure out is how do you work with that large set of things so that your solution has a chance of success. So that's the fourth challenge, appreciating existing systems. So longer discussion. Okay. But I indicated a paper where we had where we have applied that. Yes. I'm going to move to the next one. And the next challenge, the fifth challenge, is something that I think would be appreciated by many of our scholars and some of the PhD students I see back there, right? As PhD students, one of the things that we are often looking at is this idea that first, we want to complete our dissertation, right? Second, we want to write good research papers, right? And third, we go through that 6 years of probation, right? So we get something called tenure, right? Now, if that's what's happening, then clearly there are two things that are happening in every research project if you want to pursue impact. One is that you're beginning to get some research findings that you're going to put out as papers in scholarly outlets. The second thing that you're doing is you're generating some solution, some design that you're going to share with your partner, right? And what was it that we said? I'll go back to this group here, the master students that I see. When was the last time that you picked up a research paper and read it all on your own? When your professor did not ask you to do that? I see a few smiles there. Okay. So what we're trying to say is that we need to find better ways of communicating with our practitioners. Okay. Now, when it comes to research, I have a couple of simple things, and this is more in terms of research now. So the next couple of things are going to be more aimed at faculty and PhD students. Very rarely do we get to see any kind of writing as something that you do it once and you give it to somebody and then say, great, this is done. Now, if you have kids in your life or nephews and nieces in your life, right? At one point in time, when they are 2 years old and 3 years old, you can tell them, do this, and they'll do it. After that, what happens? It's negotiation. It's a lot of negotiation, right? Because they're testing boundaries, what they can and cannot do, right? It is that negotiation that is part of any of these things. When you're talking about writing as a researcher, you can think about that same negotiation that happens with your partners as well as with your peers. And so this piece here is where a researcher or a scholar is writing research papers. And this piece up here is where a researcher or scholar is sharing those solutions, those designs with the industry partner. And it is not simply a matter of a one-way communication, but it's always that dialogue. And it's not always fun. It requires a lot of effort, a lot of convincing. I will indicate one difficult challenge that comes up for researchers. If you pursue this kind of research, when you're working with an industry partner, you are going to focus on solving the problem. And when you are solving the problem, you're often not thinking about a particular theory. You're thinking about solving the problem. So, as a researcher, you get to then choose. You have to figure out and choose how to communicate your findings to your peers. So you have to now indicate to yourself, think to yourself, what's the research stream that I'm going to contribute to? And for this piece, I'm only looking at the PhD students and the faculty members, because I think it really makes sense to you, right? If I am trying to figure out how to communicate this piece of research, I can communicate this as contribution to the knowledge management stream, or training stream, or organization learning stream. The research I draw on, the prior work that I draw on, it's all different, right? I might have done the same work, but I have to frame it differently so that I can communicate to different audiences. And so this is one significant challenge that comes up for scholars when we try to circulate documents. We don't have to go through this. This is only for the PhD students in the back. When you prepare your writing, very often we end up sharing a draft with our advisors, and we would like our advisors to give us feedback. This is the scale called the Gutman scale, which comes from Diane Bailey at UT Austin that I use. Getting a lot of exercise today. So we want our advisor to give us feedback on our ideas. But the advisor cannot get to ideas till you've gone through grammar, a logical development of your argument, and style. And style is something that fits with the genre that you're working with. So this is something that that our PhD students can look at. Yeah. An example from the project that one of the projects that we are working on, the distinction between research findings and solution design. I chose this as an example because one of your professors, Dr. Bulgun, is actually somebody who's a partner with me on this research project. So this is an example we can pursue both kinds of projects. Okay, we're coming to the very last one, which is the impact, the demonstration of impact. Now, this whole thing started with the difference between quality and impact. Remember that? So quality is the idea that you can have great A-level publications, etc. But impact is when you start thinking about external stakeholders. How do you demonstrate impact? Well, it's simple, right? Who are my external stakeholders? Who cares about this reason? Then how do I show that I have had some impact? A few pieces here that I want to share with you. Here's an example. If I'm doing some research that might be of value to, the HR managers or some company or the state legislature, so I can think about identifying my external stakeholders. And I can think about identifying what I call impact indicators. Influence. My influence is somebody using my research? Is there any visibility that I'm getting, right? Some of these things can be difficult when you are working directly with the company. When you're working directly with the company, you might go with user utility, but influence and visibility might be more difficult. So depending upon the kind of work that you're doing, you can pursue different impact indicators. is an example that comes from the UK reference framework, where they use what are called cases. A lot of different cases where you can think about, and here's the URL for that. So they suggest documenting cases where you're describing what you did and what an impact. So you can take a look at this if you're interested. I want to go back to the point that that we received earlier, which was this idea of how can you have impact without doing quality research. So this is something that is sometimes referred to, in this case, a unit of analysis question. So you can say that I write one paper and it will have an impact. But more often than not, we end up writing many papers, right? A group of related papers. So somebody might have, 6, 7 papers related to a particular idea, unpacking that. Okay. Or we can have papers from an entire group of program of research, or the entire body of work from a researcher group. So somebody might be known, right? Client might be known for some research related to the methods, right? And in which case, it may not be tied to a single paper, but there's something that is tied to the body. And it's the last one that's the most problematic. No published scholarly work. Will you still have an impact? God says yes, and I will agree with that. But it is a very difficult argument to make within a university sector. That's what few people know, right? So this is the battle that I have faced within my own university, where I try to say we have some fantastic people on our faculty who continue to have that impact, but they don't necessarily have published scholarly work as the source, right? And this is a longer argument, and so I see some people nodding about this. I'm happy to have an offline discussion. This is also an important consideration. The fact that you are nodding about it says that yep, you are familiar with it. Okay. As far as measuring impact, how many of us know Google Scholar? Have you guys seen Google Scholar? Yeah. So Google Scholar says these many people have cited my work, right? And when I say people, who are these people? Other researchers who have published, right? But you can think about that impact in many different ways. Look at that. News, blogs, Twitter, Facebook, Wikipedia. Does Google Scholar take into account any of those? It does not, right? So now we are beginning to see what are called alternative metrics, right? So alt metrics, right? Or plume analytics. People, the researchers here, are you familiar with this? Yeah. Do you guys use it at Advances?
Plume analytics, I guess it's just it appears on if you have an LCP subscription.
Right. Is it used in evaluation of faculty?
I think I'm not the right person. If we have some more senior faculty, they can answer.
I've never read it. It's just me.
Okay. So we are beginning to go down this path at Bentley about the possibility of using it.
What do you think, what's your opinion of peer review of this OER? I know there's been some fields, really pushing OER in journals.
When you say OER,
Open educational.
so
Open access.
Yeah. So a quick answer to your question is a phrase that I use now as part of something else I do at Bentley, which is entrepreneurship. I have students coming in and say, should I study entrepreneurship or should I do traditional, finance, marketing, etc. And my answer is that you need both. So you need Google Scholar, right? I mean, this goes to that point about, how can you have impact without showing that scholarly publication? That's a separate conversation, but you have Google Scholar and you need this also. So I do end up using this myself and I push my colleagues to do this as well. Now, so far, this whole thing started with those orthogonal quality and impact. Remember that? Okay, so now. Here is the next few slides, we'll wrap it up. So should we give up on quality and focus on impact? Should we pursue both quality and impact? Is it feasible? I'll take a pause here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's tough to know. I'm thinking back like to COVID, when, you know, having tried and true solutions were really important, but you needed time to do the research, replicate the findings and all that kind of stuff. So I think in a lot of ways, it's a very practical challenge of doing research. Like for instance, like with the COVID stuff, like I don't know how you could do longitudinally show quality research.
So you're
Something
saying,
you can, yes.
okay, so you're saying we should or we shouldn't?
I think it's very hard to do both. I think it's almost kind of like the fast food argument versus like, you know, the dinner that takes a long time. So I do think that academia can be better and we can be more efficient. I have like one article that's under review. It's been under review for almost a year now, right? That doesn't serve the public at all, you know, when we have something like that. So yeah, I'm kind of talking about both sides of it. I do think it's very hard to do, especially for things that like really make impact. For that earlier slide, the 17 things that it showed.
Okay, so before I attempt my response to that, any other comments?
A couple of thoughts. One thing about demonstrating impact. In the previous slide, do you think it's also a factor of disseminating your research? No, mostly, I mean, if you see quality researchers, they don't really engage in marketing their work or disseminating their work in different outlets, and that severely impacts, severely reduces their impact, the way it's done. Also, on the other end, top journals, the gatekeepers, they are really afforded some amount of quality, some level of quality, when researchers are competing there. So are we going back to the question of relevance?
Yeah, okay. So that, I'll speak the relevance of speaker, that's too big a debate. But the first point you talked about is that we, as faculty members and researchers, we are not trained to show how, we're not trained to figure out how to take whatever we are doing and bring it to the general public or to other stakeholders. Right? And so that is the problem. Some universities do fantastic about it. We are trying to get some of these elements of Bentley. I don't know what Bentley says, but you know, every time there's a paper, you can go put out a news report, a news article, press report, and things like that. If we can start doing some of that stuff, things will get picked up. But I think this is a big issue, and this is really what, all of the stuff that I talked about for the last half an hour, 45 minutes plus, it comes down to this, right? And this is Arun Rai, chief editor of MIS Quarterly, part of his editorial. Look at what it said. The MISQ expects work to create significant scholarly value and practical utility, resulting in a broader impact on business and society. Yes.
I think the point you made earlier, the question you asked earlier was key. You asked a master's student who picks up on it.
Yeah.
And if your audience,
Yeah.
your research,
Yeah.
particularly your peers,
Yeah.
that is from. You probably pull up us for the routine, right?
Yep.
Our students not.
Yep.
I've grown up, I'm just trained by some of these areas.
Yep. Yep.
So if you're really trying to get that broader impact on business and society, isn't the target of what you're trying to stimulate your research, get into the community?
Yeah.
More like the chicken and egg.
Yeah, so perhaps the press reports that we talked about can into that, right?
And I don't think here, free card, right? I don't think we're doing that. We do press reports.
But in the sense that within the college, I mean, we have a project where we're.
But we're just sending it amongst our peers. It's not going as a journal.
It's good for students or something, but yeah, I do agree that it needs to be more broader. Yeah, it just shows that. Always needs.
Can I say something to that? I think that's a great point. Reflecting on it, I've done some work for serving as a reviewer for National Science Foundations, public tax dollars and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that they value is taking your results and how you're gonna disseminate it to the public, which is, that's Dr. Rand's point. Like going before the school board and saying, here's what we found, or creating like a YouTube video. Actually, that's something I'm working with college education. It's something that we're trying to do where the researcher can sit down for 2 to 3 minutes and say, here's an article that we just published. Now we're gonna distill it in a 2 to 3 minute YouTube video where talk about our research and impact. So I think it's kind of like the culture of like, we want you as faculty to do this, but also have like the infrastructure, being able to target some of those things like what you're talking about.
Yeah, so they may not pick up the paper, but they might go listen to the 2-minute YouTube video,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I think the question still remains, is this feasible for us? Is this feasible for us? So, last comment, and then I will attempt to, provide a potential solution.
There is a problem that we want to solve based on how our subscribers are behaving. And I will try to look for solutions online, but only I will come up with all the people that I will. And the problem is to find challenges that to make sense probably is specific.
Yeah.
For instance, if I do not have clothing and I need to clothe myself, instead you say, let me go for the shoe. And let me try and do research or see your size, your color, and stuff like that. But if you bring me the shoe, maybe the quality of from the research perspective, I would say, avoid using this for you. If I look for the shoe, I don't have the rest of my clothing time, I still cannot go out. The industry will not probably perceive that impactful to them, based on what they want or they expect as a solution. But in relation to research, that is quality enough.
Yeah.
That should be quality enough.
Okay. So I think that is sort of the question that we have to figure out, because the researchers and scholars have limited time, right? So they may not be able to solve many of the problems that the industry might be facing specifically. And so that's what keeps coming up again and again. Now, the next slide that I'm going to show you is something that comes from an entity called AACSB. This is the accreditation body. So University of Memphis is accredited, right? You're familiar with this. I see a lot of people nodding about it. Yeah. So this is a standard from 2020. It is actually updated in July 2023. So this is new. This is new. This is not something that we had before. And so it clearly says standard 9 and standard 8 impact a scholarship. Few schools are prepared for how to respond to it, right? So many of the things that I'm talking about here right now are not just because, erosion of trust in society, it's here. It's here now, right? For us, for business schools as well, right? So we need to find a way to deal with this very specifically. Those of us who are going to be responsible for writing the next AACSB report, you have to do this, okay? So you have to find a way to do this. So my solution to this is simple. The solution is when you start thinking about quality and impact, what is it that we've been saying? Should we do both, right? It's not a binary. It's not a either or, it's not both also. I think what you really need is a classic business school solution, which is, if I can get my click to work, a 2x2. So if you consider, you're not doing one research project, are you? You're not writing one research paper. You're writing many, right? So if you think about something that has high broader impact and high quality, you're up there, you get a gold star, right? But not everything you do may be there. Sometimes some of your stuff may be high impact, but it's published in a low quality output. That's okay. Right? If you happen to be somebody who is writing that super ultra high quality research paper, you're up here. But you're not as worried about impact right now, because you're going to establish your chops. I am somebody who can do this research, right? That's a very different message that you're sending to your public. So if you think about this as a 2x2, you can now place yourself in that. And as a researcher, as a group, as a department, as a college, you can have a strategy. The strategy could be some of us are going to be here, some of my papers are going to be here, other papers are going to be here. Right? So one way of addressing this, we started with with the 2 dimensions. And then we are trying to get to a closure, which is our 2x2. Okay. So in some ways, what I've tried to do is hopefully trace some things for you. So this is an example for altmetrics of one of our papers, but I will close with this slide. What I've realized when I'm talking to my colleagues is I cannot say I'm pleading to pursue impact, but I'm hoping that we will all pursue impact, right? So that's one. Second is quality is not the same as impact. Yeah? Quality is not the same as impact. You can write high quality papers, but impact is impact beyond academia. Impact is not Google citations. In fact, the way we are defining it has what NSF would define it. Impact beyond academia, broader impact, right? And in order to do that, we need to take a few different steps. And some of those steps are take important problems, design solutions that are worthwhile, partner effectively with stakeholders, right? We talked about this, right? Early, late, etc., right? We didn't delve too much into this, appreciating work with the existing system, because you're going to introduce a solution in a complex web of things. And all of those things will have to be dealt with. Sharing solutions, solution findings, and then claiming credit, which is what we talked about at the end, when we introduced this idea of impact, the impact indicators, and okay. I think I'll stop there. I know that we went a little bit longer. I appreciate your patience. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sandeep, and broadly, you kind of glanced over some of the research projects in the process of impact and all. So, I mean, because the theme of this paper is technology serving humanity. Can you kind of briefly talk about among all those research projects, I mean, how one or two or three ways that the technology was used to actually make the society impact?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the projects that I referred to was the first example that I gave that was related to working with my partners in Norway. So this was about individuals with IDDs, intellectual and developmental disabilities. How do you help that marginalized segment of the population transition from school to work? Resources exist for them for going to school. Once they graduate, it is super difficult because we are almost sort of less than weeks, and they nothing else. So what we ended up doing is over a period of 3 years, we worked with a group of partners that included people, the municipality. We had technology vendors. We had what are called agencies that take care of these kids, parents of these kids, schools, all of them. And we tried to figure out what is it that we can do to design technology solutions that will help them with that transition. One of the solutions that we designed, which I think, I've heard many different reactions to that, was very, very simple. We had a little app that these kids, I'm calling them kids, but some of them are like 25, 30 years old. Because, they are at a different stage of intellectual development, so they have just gone through high school. Now they're trying to figure out what to do with their life. So we had a little app that asks them questions, things like, what do you like to do? I like to work with other people. Yes, no. I like to work with animals. Yes, no. I like to do the same thing again and again. Yes, no. A series of questions that will allow them to make career choices. This was an eye opener because what ended up happening is one example. One of them came up with, answered all of those questions. And what the app suggested is you might want to go into something that is more sort of I think they call, and this is, I'm translating from not, creative space. And so there was a particular word that, and the kid said, yes, I want to be a drummer. I want to be a drummer in a band. And the parents were there and they said, never told us that. So what we might think about something very simple is something that we were able to help bring up. So that's one example. I'll tell you a second example very quickly. Same project. So we have a lot of students here and some of us we take a bus, for example, to go from your apartment to the university, right? Now, what happens if the bus is delayed? What happens if the bus breaks down? Do you ever worry that you will get stuck, that you will have a problem? But hopefully a second bus is going to come, right? If you are an individual with an intellectual disability, it's not easy. If something like that happens, you are lost. You don't know what to do. You are in a place where you want a routine, right? And you're suddenly faced with things where you don't know what to do. And I don't know, that's a stranger. I can't talk to that person. I have no idea what to do. So we had an app where we combined both the bus information, etc., plus communication with the care team so that we can help them navigate this. Because if you're helping them transition from school to work, one of the very basic things that we take for granted for ourselves is how do you go from home to work? That is not basic. Without that, we are lost, right? And in a country like Norway, we are also looking at snowstorms and things like that that affect the people. So that is the second. Hopefully that helps a little.
Thanks for the great presentation. I just wonder, can you give us an example of the high impact of the low quality research? And then when we come across that kind of situation, should we go for it or should you think about it?
High impact, low quality research, I think within the ISB, you can think a little bit about papers that have been published in, I think there used to be this art journal called Datamation or something like that. People had work they would publish about how to manage a project, things of that nature. And so when I say low quality, people might jump on me, but it's not ISR in my view. And so I would say it is not as high quality as ISR or MIC. Sometimes that research gets picked up by a number of organizations and they start using some of those things, right? So that would be an example, I would say. By the way, you use the word low quality, phrase low quality, right? Did I hear you correctly? Low quality?
Yeah, use your word.
Okay.
Not my word.
No. I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you saying that. But I will also tell you that oh, it's stuck now. It's not moving.
It only moves forward, not back.
Oh, is that right? I guess so. So that 2x2 that I showed. The last conversation that I had, and this is something that we're trying to push out within Bentley as well. The last conversation I had, the biggest objection was to the word low. How can it be low quality? It's publishing. Okay. And it's did not come from IS, it came from other disciplines. So I think I sort of get a little more defensive, based on those. But I think to your point, I think you can see lots of these kinds of things. Another example that I will give you is people, we have some colleagues who have done work that has appeared in case research. And so some of that then gets used in a number of different places. And one might argue that case research is not necessarily a top level. So those will be a couple of examples that I will, that I will give you. But certainly we can identify more. It's a good question. I should be more prepared with a very specific answer.
Yeah, it's, it's all like, all back down, how you define quality, right?
Correct.
Because it's, okay, a lot of people use it's popular, right? Does that mean high quality is like coding?
No, so we define high quality, we define high quality purely based on as judged by your peers. So if it's judged by your peers, that's high quality, then our, ranking is on. That's, so that's the quality.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Sandeep.
Thank
So
you.
on behalf of
And sorry about the darkness.
Yeah, no, you have.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay, we were able to.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay sometimes, you can't expect these things.
Yeah.